And now part 2 of Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. The Look of Love was a surprise hit from their last album, Look Around. And that song got to number 4 on the charts and spent 14 weeks on the charts. So this success pushed them into the pop stratosphere. Now, trouble was brewing behind the scenes in spite of this success. On January 1, 1968, Sergio Mendes severed his relationship with Richard Adler, and Mendes Enterprises took over all management, although A&M Records did all the booking. Janice Hansen, who got her lucky break doing the lead vocal on The Look of Love, was promised that she would be getting more lead vocals. Now this made perfect sense, because obviously if you have a big hit with this certain singer, maybe lightning can strike twice. And she hadn't had her own spotlight before, so Sergio Mendes, I guess, said that would be fine. The problem is the male members of the group had gone to Sergio Mendes asking for more recognition and more money. On the Look Around album, none of the band members or the singers are mentioned by name anywhere on this album. And this happened on the first album as well. They are mentioned on the second album. But I think by keeping the band members and the singers anonymous, this helped Sergio Mendes keep some control over his players. Now, one guy that is mentioned on here, the guitar player who played on the first 3 albums, he gets credit on here, but he's not even in the band. So you can see how somewhat lopsided this is. So once the guys made a collective play for more money, Sergio Mendes fired the entire group. So Mendes had no qualms about starting over from scratch. He'd been in many bands, and here's a quote from him. He said, "For me, the girls are like instruments. They could be saxophonists from Czechoslovakia. My main concern is the sound." So he assembled a new group with very seasoned players from Brazil. These guys were Sebastião Neto on bass, Damu Murmao on drums, and Rubens Bassini on percussion. Now, these new players were well seasoned, and Sebastião Neto played on the Brazil 65 album, and Rubens Bassini had played with some pretty big name Brazilian players, and Damu Murmao had played with Sergio on the Cannonball Adderley album and with Herbie Mann. He later went on to play with Weather Report, so he was a monster player. So it looks like Mendes is running an extremely tight ship here, and he is. But I don't think he fired the other guys because of the money necessarily. Because if you're going to get a guy on board like Damu Murmao, who at this point was like in the top 3 drummers of all of Brazil, you got to pay him. So this was an opportunity, I think, that Mendes was maybe looking for, was to make a sweeping change and clear the decks and bring in some better players. Now, all 3 of these new guys are all quite a bit older than Sergio Mendes by like 7 or 8 years. So the old guys from the original group, those guys were younger guys, and they looked basically like 3 Brazilian Cary Grants. Not so much with the new guys, not too photogenic. With the new rhythm section in place, Sergio Mendes now had to find 2 female singers. And this was remedied by the involvement of Herb Alpert. So Alpert, he owns the label, and he's trying to protect his interests. He's like, you know, Lonnie Hall is a big part of the brand of this group. She's got a great voice, and that's the voice on the first 3 albums. I suggest you retain her. Now, obviously, Herb Alpert had a lot of pull here, and Sergio and him were friends, and they had a great working relationship together. So Sergio was fine with it. He went along with it. But one of the other things that was going on here was Herb Alpert had started a relationship with Lonnie Hall. So this was also part of how this came to be. With Lonnie Hall back in the fold, only one more vocalist was needed. Janice Hansen was not considered. So in an effort to balance out some of the non-pop star looks of the 3 new guys, they hired Karen Phillip. Now, Karen Phillip had seen the ad for this position in Variety, and she successfully auditioned. Now, she only graduated 4 months prior to this at the University of Redlands, and after 2 weeks of intense rehearsals, she and the new group debuted at Manhattan's Lincoln Center. Now, all these lineup changes were done rather quickly, and by the time the Look of Love single came out, it was Karen Phillip's photograph that was on the picture sleeve of the 45. Despite all the personnel changes, Sergio Mendes still found time to record a solo album, My Favorite Things. With the group's success, Sergio Mendes actually released 2 singles off the solo album, one of which charted. And this whole album sounds a little bit like what I would call the instrumental craze of 1968. You had Paul Marriott's Love is Blue, and then coming up soon after this album was released, you had Mason Williams' Classical Gas. So this album kind of follows in that trend, which I guess Sergio helped to create. And I would call this an album that was kind of one of those middle-of-the-road jazzier albums. But one of the things I noticed is that some of the songs on here foreshadow the sound of Steely Dan in the next decade. All right, this is the album Favorite Things by Sergio Mendes, and Tom Scott does play on here, guitars John Pisano, Damu Ramao. So some of the players that he had just been working with are on this record. So the next album, The Fool on the Hill, this is the first album with the new lineup.
And he never seems to notice, but the fool on the hill, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Remember me to the one.
After the huge success of The Look of Love, Sergio Mendes follows with 2 more cover songs. This time, Fool on the Hill, which is a great Beatle cover, and the Simon Garfunkel song, Scarborough Fair. Fool on the Hill charted at #1 in the adult contemporary chart and #6 on the pop chart, and Scarborough Fair #2 on the adult contemporary chart. So these songs were huge hits, got lots of radio airplay, and The Fool on the Hill is a very interesting cover. It's not a typical cover of a Beatles song. That's where Sergio Mendes takes these songs to somewhat of a different level, and he does a very great arrangement on Fool on the Hill. Likewise, on Scarborough Fair, that song has got this kind of spooky, windy, swirly feel to it that makes it even more atmospheric than the Simon & Garfunkel version. So great, great covers, great arrangements. The lavishly produced covers were balanced up by 3 very excellent songs by songwriter Edu Lobo, one of Brazilia's finest young writers. One thing that sets Brazilian music apart from other music is that the emphasis on the beat is on the 1 and the 3 as opposed to the 2 and the 4. Now in that last song, Festa, Lani Hall starts writing some English lyrics for that. So she's getting more involved in the songwriting process now. Now this album hit #3 on the charts, and it's a great balance of cover songs and Brazilian songs. So let me talk to you a little bit about the artwork here, because this always reminded me of kind of a Salvador Dali kind of setup here where they look to be in the desert. But actually they are not in the desert. They're actually on a woman's body. And where my hand is here, this part of the album cover got to be a bit of an issue. And Sears department store would not carry it. And what they did is they would put a sticker over that, hyping the Scarborough Fair and Fool on the Hill singles. So it's kind of interesting how A&M Records just 3 years before did the Whipped Cream cover, and Herb Alpert he thought that was a bit risque, was nervous about that. Here 3 years later, they're actually putting some female anatomy on the back cover of this. So obviously, Sergio Mendes here, he's making a break from the old Brazil 66. He's doing so with a new lineup, new singers, and new artwork. Now to introduce the new band, he wisely includes individual photographs with the names of everybody here on this album. There were some promotional films. You see them here on the beach. There were films done to essentially promote the new band. So that was something that was very handy to have. That song, La Pina, featured a different vocalist. It was the vocals of Gracinha Leporassi. Now, she was a new Brazilian singer on the scene, and that's the only vocal she does on this album. And it leads me to think that perhaps she was maybe the one that was going to replace Lani Hall originally. Now, Sergio Mendes who brought her along. Instead of her joining the group full-time, she got her own group called Bossa Rio. This was also on A&M Records, produced by Sergio Mendes. So basically she fronted her own, I guess you call it Brazil 66 Light group. And this group started supporting Brazil 66 on their tours. Janice Hansen, along with the dismissed members from Brazil 66, they formed a new group called The Carnival with ex-Mermaid singer Terry Fisher. This group had some promise and was produced by Bones Howe, and Bones Howe foresaw this group as being kind of a Brazilian Fifth Dimension. Now, the Carnival only did one album, and Janice Hansen actually was with a second group going on concurrent with the Carnival, and this was called The Going Thing. And this was a group led by John and Tom Baylor. These guys had basically run the group The Love Generation, if you remember them. And this Going Thing was essentially a marketing tool for Ford Motor Companies.
It's a whole new thing. It's what's happening. It's the going thing. Ford. It's the way to swing. Go and have your fling.
When a swinging group like Bright Young America is introduced to Ford's new 1969 Torino, sometimes you have to listen twice.
Hey, the Torino has a new 428 mil. I hear the power anchors are caliper discs.
By 1970, Janice Hansen, after a failed attempt to do a second Carnival album, essentially left the music business. With several hits under their belt, Brazil 66 became a very popular live attraction, and the new band proved very capable of delivering the goods. Likewise, the new vocal lineup with Karen Phillip was striking both vocally and visually. On one side of the stage, you have the shy, demure Lonnie, who's the petite brunette. And on the other side of the stage, you have Karen Phillip, who's not shy at all, who's always dancing, whipping her hair around, big smile on her face as if she's having the time of her life. So Karen brought a new energy to the live shows that audiences really responded to. By November of 1968, the group traveled to Great Britain to do shows there, and A&M Records did a special promotional campaign releasing the single The Fool on the Hill, backed with a little help from my friends, and a compilation album to go along with it. The group finished up the year releasing one Christmas song on this compilation by A&M Records called Something Festive. We are in early 1969, and the group released their next album, Crystal Illusions.
For that's the way to start to make a pretty world for you and for me. Sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away.
The first single released on the album is The Sunshiny Pretty World, and that hit number 4 on the Adult Contemporary chart and number 62 on Billboard's Pop chart. Now, the next single was also a hit and did about as well on the charts, and that was Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. And they go back to the formula of doing a somewhat recent hit and giving it a new, updated, and sophisticated arrangement. You Stepped Out of a Dream is very over the top, and Grusin really takes it maybe a little too far on that arrangement. And on this album, there are only 2 Portuguese songs, and the ones that are here pale in comparison to the 3 songs that Edu Lobo provided on the prior album. Now, Lobo does contribute 1 song, and that's the title track.
The shadows walking beside me.
The title track, Crystal Illusions, is easily the highlight of this album, and it's probably Sergio Mendes' most acclaimed voyage into psychedelia. Now, this is a long track, and it gives the album like a conceptual feel, and gives Mendes a chance to stretch out a little bit on the keyboards. And in this particular song, Lonnie Hall offers English lyrics to this Portuguese track. Speaking of psychedelia, we see the artwork on here, very trendy, very much like what's going on in rock at the time. And by late 1969, the group had been on world tours, so maybe Mendes took his eye off the prize a little bit, and that's why this album, the tracks on here may seem a little bit weaker by comparison to Fool on the Hill. Now, this album hit number 33 on the charts, and they focused on their next single.
Searching in the sand for another overload.
Wichita Lineman is an example of the breezy formula Mendes would use, taking an existing hit and putting a new spin on it and making it his own and reimagining it. Now this one, Wichita Lineman, I always felt like Lonnie Hall's vocals weren't used to their strengths in this song, and she gives a slight iffy performance on this one. And as a result, it only charted at number 34 in the adult contemporary chart and number 95 on the pop chart. So the next album is this one, Ye Mele, and Wichita Lineman was the lead-off single for this album. Now the next single that they did was another cover, and this was another Beatles song.
So I lit the fire, isn't it good? No, he just would.
By this time, Sergio Mendes was a well-established musician, and he didn't always offer positive opinions of a lot of the current pop music. That was not true of the Beatles. He loved their melodies, and here's what he said. "I love the melodies of the Beatles. Can I put a Brazilian touch to their songs? Can I take it to another place so it doesn't sound like the original?" Well, I think he does exactly that with Norwegian Wood. The arrangement is one of the more interesting covers you're ever going to hear of a Beatles song, and Sergio takes this wild piano solo in the middle of it that it reminds me of the group Chicago, what they were going to start doing in a few years. So that's what he does on this song. Now, this would be the fifth and final Beatles cover Brazil 66 would do. I've always appreciated Sergio Mendes taking chances on how he arranges these cover songs, but they don't always work, and I think this next one doesn't.
What the world needs now is love, sweet love. No, not just for some, but for everyone. Especially people who care about strangers, who care about even social injustice.
One cover that doesn't work is the sped up What the World Needs Now. Now, despite this being a popular live song that they would do, I don't think it works very well. Unlike Easy to Be Hard, which I think they do a great job on. Lonnie gives a great vocal, and I wish they could have released it as a single instead of Three Dog Night. Now, like Crystal Illusions, this album, Ye Mele, doesn't have the zip of the prior albums, with the exception of these two songs.
The love that used to be in your eyes. Yeah, mele, yada, yeah, mele, yada.
Ye Mele, the title track, is a great example of how they can bring an unknown Brazilian song to life. And this song probably should have been the single instead of Wichita Lineman. Now, they also do a little R&B on this album, and they're getting a little bit away from their original sound, but Sergio Mendes realizes he had to keep on top of things and move in new directions like the Beatles to stay relevant. Now, this album only charted at number 71, so we're starting to dip down the charts here. We were at 33 with Crystal Illusions, the prior album, and now at 71. And one of the things I couldn't understand, even though this is a really cool painting and it looks Brazilian, this is done by Ivan de Moraes, why wouldn't you put Lonnie and Karen on the front cover here? You've got two of the most beautiful women in the industry, and you relegate them to the back cover in a black and white photo. And mind you, there's no names on the back of this album anywhere and no instrumentation listed. Even though their albums and singles were charting lower and lower, they were still a popular live attraction. Now, one of the things that made them popular as a live attraction, I think, was Karen Phillip. And unfortunately, she did not get a lead vocal on any of these first three albums. And possibly, I have to imagine that had to do with the popularity of The Look of Love when Janice Hansen had her first lead vocal, and then she wanted more lead vocals on the albums. And I think there was always an attempt to keep these people somewhat anonymous so that they couldn't, you don't give them too much opportunity, in other words. Karen probably earned the right to more time in the spotlight because she learned Portuguese phonetically. And being the practical woman that she was, she had a long-term relationship with one of the band members, and she learned to speak Portuguese. And along with Lonnie Hall's delivery of her Portuguese, they were both very convincing. We are now in June of 1970, and the group releases a greatest hits package. Now, this is a pretty good compilation, 12 tracks. And the only thing I would say that's bad about it is it's over relying on some of the cover songs. Day Tripper is included on here, and I think I'm going out of my head. Both of those songs were popular live cuts that they had always done in concert, but they probably would have been better served including some more songs like Mas Que Nada, some more of the Portuguese songs. Nonetheless, very good album. Unfortunately, it only charted at number 101. And though it did stay in the charts for 20 weeks, it was a disappointment. Now, in other parts of the world, they got a live album called Live at the Expo 70. Now, this was not released in the States. This was released in Europe, Japan, Australia, and Brazil. Now, this is an excellent recording of their live stuff, and they probably decided, well, since this is basically a greatest hits, but live, it was either do a greatest hits package or a live album that features the greatest hits. So the United States didn't get this, and initially the rest of the world didn't get this. So I think I would have preferred American audiences getting this because you really get a good feel for how good of a live group they were.
Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Remember me to the one who lives there. He once was a true love of mine.
After finishing that live tour, the group settled into doing their next album in late 1970 in December, and that was Stillness. After the disappointing showing of the greatest hits release, the group got down to business in the studio and the results were impressive. They came out of the gates with a legit rock song, a cover of Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth.
Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
This cover is super funky, and we have Karen Phillip getting her own lead vocal here, and we get some diversity here that shows that she was probably underutilized. Now, this was the first single from the album, and it restored them to the top 10 of the adult contemporary chart. It hit number 10, but only bubbled under the pop chart at number 101. Stillness is often called a concept album. It's not your typical AM easy listening music. It's much more literary.
Sometimes in winter, I wish the empty street. Every morning, stillness meets me. It's a righteous life we're leading, friends. Heavy dues paid fee.
I think this album is really good, and some of the supporting musicians are Tom Scott and Oscar Castro Neves on guitar. These songs represent more of a sound of what I would call aiming at the highbrow hippie. So one of the songs we have on here is Sometimes in Winter. It's a great track off of the second Blood, Sweat, and Tears album, and a couple of new ones like the title track and Righteous Life, which is possibly the best track on the album. Now, Mendes is clearly pushing their musical boundaries, but they still retain some of their original sound on these songs.
Oh, won't you stay? We'll put on the day. There's a sun show every second.
They handled the Joni Mitchell song Chelsea Morning in their usual classy style, and Viramundo was one of only 2 Portuguese language songs on the album.
Don't help me, my love, my brother, my girl. Just tell her name, just let me say who am I.
With Lost in Paradise, we see the return of Graciela Leperassi. Now, she had guested on the Fool on the Hill album, and it appeared that maybe she was going to be the replacement for Lonnie Hall. Well, in this case, she is the replacement for Lonnie Hall. This is Lonnie Hall's last album with the group, and it's often told that Lonnie Hall left partway through this album to go off and marry Herb Alpert. That's not exactly true. She and Herb Alpert didn't marry until 1974. And on this album, Lonnie sings on all the songs. She sings lead on every song except for the one that Karen Phillip did, and the one you just heard, Lost in Paradise. So what I see of this album is more of a baton pass to Gracinia. And if you look at the album cover, we have the photo here. We have Lonnie here on the cover photo, and we have Lonnie here on the back cover photo. But on the inside, no Lonnie, and we have Gracinia right here. And again, we don't mention any of the names of the band members on this album, except in the small print here, introducing Gracinia. Now, what was going on here is, as I mentioned, Herb Alpert and Lonnie Hall had a relationship together, and this idea of her going off to marry him, yes, she did in fact do that, but you know, these marriages oftentimes are easy to get into than they are to get out of, so there's some transition here. So this was part of that, and we have the same thing going on with Sergio Mendes. He became an item with Gracinia. Now, in both cases, Alpert and Mendes were both married with kids. So as I said, these things take time, and we've got, where's the song? Bossa Nova. So, Bossa Rio, rather. These are the two albums that Gracinia had done with the other band, and this probably was good indentured servitude for her now to join the real thing, being Brazil 66. Now, there were a couple other personnel changes on this album in addition to Gracinia. The drummer Romao had left, and they added Claudio Sloan on drums and Laudier de Olivier on conga. Now, those guys don't play in the album, but they are pictured on both front and back. So there's this little transition going on here with the album covers. And unfortunately, Stillness only made it to number 130 on the album chart. And although not as popular as their other albums, it's their swan song, and some of their fans consider it their very best work. And it's just a natural progression in where they had been before. And Sergio Mendes was always very aware of progressing musically, so this album is a good representation of that. Unfortunately, it just didn't catch on with the public. Speaking of keeping up with the times, Sergio Mendes felt this was the perfect moment to update the brand, and they changed the name of the group to Brazil 77. This is in 1971, and they didn't waste any time working on their next album, País Tropical. This album does have a definite new sound, partially because of the use of Tom Scott on saxophone on here, and the new art movement called Tropicalismo.
Obrigação com força, parece até que tudo aquilo ali é seu.
Gracinia is in very good form on this album, but this is the first time in 5 albums that Karen Phillip actually gets credit with providing vocals on record.
Having known you, I would never even try. You were something to remember. So busy fighting, there's no time for learning. Turning their backs on the people they might like to know.
Those songs were compositions by Paul Williams and Roger Nichols, and they do an interesting cover of J.J. Cale's After Midnight.
Gonna give an exhibition, gonna find out what it's all about.
This album, País Tropical, only charted at number 160, so not that different from Stillness. And unfortunately, Karen Phillip's time with Brazil 77 didn't last very long. Not long after they attended and played at a White House event, Karen Phillip left the group. Now, she chose to leave the music industry to dive into television, and the problem with this is that she really had no acting experience, although she had plenty of showbiz experience. She did some commercials for Buick, Viceroy, and sang a couple of jingles, and she eventually landed the role of Lieutenant Dish in the new TV show MASH. The launch of Karen Phillip's TV career coincided with the spread in 1972's September issue of Playboy magazine. And a lengthy article goes into her disillusionment with the music industry and her transition into the world of television. Now, unfortunately, her MASH character didn't last too long, but she did appear regularly in television shows. Notably, she was in the television movie called A Brand New Life with Cloris Leachman. And she had guest appearances on shows like Emergency, Canon, and then she landed a recurring role on Quincy, among other appearances. She got steady work into the mid-80s, at which time she retired, got married, and raised a family. Now, Lonnie Hall had started a solo career. She did an album called Sundown Lady. And interestingly enough, she recorded the song Sundown. Now, if you hear it, you're going to recognize this song. This is the song called Muskrat Love. Now, this song was originally called Muskrat Candlelight, done by Willis Allen Ramsey, a Texas songwriter. So she's the second person that I'm aware of that recorded the song, and she did a lot of lyric changing to fit her style.
Talking to the heavens above. Looks like here comes love.
On this album, she covers a pair of Elton John songs that were on Tumbleweed Connection, so she clearly was a fan. In fact, she eventually met Elton John and said how much of a fan she was. And he said, well, Elton John responded to her, he said, we met already. I met you when I opened for you in 1970 in England. So she hadn't remembered that. But her career continued on a successful path, most notably in 1983 when she did the Bond song, Never Say Never Again. That was produced by Sergio Mendes and Herb Alpert. Sergio Mendes continued Brazil 77 through the decade and added new vocalist Bonnie Bowden. And they had some minor hits, and their sound somewhat foreshadowed the disco era.
Where is the love you said you'd give to me as soon as you were free? Will it ever be? Where is the love?
Like Lonnie Hall, Sergio Mendes had his biggest hit in 1983 with the song Never Gonna Let You Go. Now, this song you probably remember, a surprise hit that musicologist and YouTuber Rick Beato called the most complex pop song ever recorded. So a great song, and Sergio continued to surprise audiences, changing the name to Brazil 88 to Brazil 99. Sergio had a resurgence in 2006 when he teamed with the Black Eyed Peas on a remake of Mas Que Nada. Sergio and Gracinha were married for over 50 years, and at this recording, Lonnie Hall and Herb Alpert are still married, and they're going strong. So congratulations to them. I'd love to speak to Lonnie or Karen if they ever get the chance to contact me. I would love to interview you. Interesting story, and there's not too much information out there on the group Brazil 66. So this was a really fun one to put together, a band I've always loved. This group has got such a strong catalog, and all the albums that I went over in part one and in this part, I would say all their albums are very consistent, and every album's got like 4 killer songs on it at least. There isn't a masterpiece album, I don't think, among them, but they're all very consistent, and you won't go wrong really getting any of them. No one has done more to bring Brazilian music to the mainstream than Sergio Mendes. And though Brazil 66 is often thought of as like an easy listening group or middle of the road, they've got great players, great arrangements, and great singers. And that combination will always make it essential 1960s music listening. So let's talk about the greatest hits here in the compilations. I mentioned this one earlier. This is a great one to get if you're looking for some quick vinyl. You can find it pretty easily. There's also a variation with an orange cover. So all the A&M artists in the late 60s had greatest hits that look exactly like this. So it can get a little confusing. The photo's usually just different, that's all. Now there's a CD compilation with 2 CDs called The Very Best Of. 48 tracks from their classic period from 66 to 71. That would be one to get if you're looking to be a little bit more crazy. That's pretty exhaustive instead of getting all the albums. That also is a good place to start. So I had a really good time doing this group. I started listening to these guys when I was a little bit older, more into my 30s. I said, wow, this is really hitting a spot I didn't think I'd have. But I like the jazziness, I like the sophistication, love the singing, and it continues to be life-giving and joyful to listen to. Lastly, I've got a little business to attend here. I don't like doing this, but it must be done. If you want to support this show in a bigger way, I've got a Patreon subscription that you can look into. I've got a tip jar below, and you can give a one-time donation if you like. This takes a lot of work to put these together, and I appreciate all the support. The other thing I'm always looking for and always ask for is hitting that subscription button. And again, the notification bell is important. It should let you when I have a new video out. And don't forget to check out popgoesto60s.com. That's my website, and there you can buy some very fun merchandise. And as always, thank you for watching both episodes, and I will be back very soon with one of your favorite groups here on Pop Goes to 60s.